Hello everyone, welcome to Cashcroft TV. My name is Kalen Ashcroft. Thank you very much for watching this episode of Ages of Empires, where we will be going through all the major world empires throughout history. This is a very important one as we will be covering the Qin Dynasty of ancient China and the Carthaginian Empire of, we'd say, northern Africa, but it crossed and spread it over almost the entire Mediterranean coastline. The Qin Dynasty is often considered the first imperial dynasty of ancient China, which I will detail shortly. We have covered two previous dynasties, but this is the first often considered imperial dynasty of ancient China. And the Carthaginian Empire holds a special place in my heart. I remember I was once assigned to do a project in grade school, and I didn't know which empire to choose at the time, and my father said, do Carthage. And I didn't know anything about Carthage at the time, but I thought it was a cool name, and nonetheless it's sort of kind of nostalgic coming back to it now and sort of having it greater contextualized, having covered some previous empires as well. So we will biograph or go through the history of each of these empires in the style of a rise and fall, and as well we will highlight a leader from each respective empire and have a comparison between the two at the end in the style of Plutarch's Parallel Lives, or my previous Ancient Greek and Roman series inspired by Plutarch's Parallel Lives that features a comparison between each leader to learn a little bit more about them, their respective empires, and perhaps better to lead our own lives, or at least as I will endeavor to do. So without further ado, we will begin with the first empire and first leader. So the Qin Dynasty. The Qin Dynasty was the first imperial dynasty of China, which I shall explain shortly, founded by Qin Shi Huang in 221 BCE. It marked a significant turning point in Chinese history as it established a centralized and autocratic form of government that would shape the future of China for centuries. Therefore, we seek to find a detailed account of the rise and fall of this important Qin Dynasty empire. So the dynasties before the Qin in China are not considered imperial because they did not establish a centralized autocratic form of government with a strong unified central authority. Instead, they were characterized by a system of feudalism where power was decentralized and regional lords or nobles held significant autonomy over their respective territories. So that's thus why it's considered the first imperial dynasty of China. Furthermore, here are a few characteristics that differentiate the dynasties before Qin from the imperial system. For example, the feudal structure. Prior to the Qin dynasty, China was divided into several independent states, each ruled by its own noble lord. Some of them were quite significant, however. These states operated largely autonomously with their own laws, currencies, and administrative reforms until it came the Qin dynasty. Furthermore, there was a lack of centralized authority prior. There was no single powerful central authority that held sway over all of China. Instead, the rulers of these states held a more limited, localized authority with within their own territories. Furthermore, there was an absence of a unified legal system. Each state had its own legal system, which could vary significantly from one state to another, and there was no standardized set of laws that applied overall across China until the Qin dynasty, as we shall see. Furthermore, there were fragmented cultural and linguistic differences. The various states before the Qin had different cultural practices, languages, and customs. There was therefore not yet a unified Chinese culture or language before the Qin dynasty. Furthermore, there was limited territorial expansion. For example, while some states may have expanded their territories through conquest, such as the previous ones we covered, the level of territorial integration was limited compared to that which was achieved by the Qin dynasty. So therefore, the Qin dynasty under the rule of Qin Shi Huang was the first to establish a highly centralized bureaucratic government in China. It abolished the feudal system, implemented standardized laws, writing systems, and measures, and created a unified administrative structure. This marked a significant departure from the decentralized feudalistic systems of earlier dynasties. So while the pre-Qin dynasties were important in the development of Chinese civilization, they are not considered imperial in the same sense as the Qin and subsequent dynasties because they lacked the centralized autocratic governance that characterized later imperial rule in China. So starting with the rise of the Qin dynasty, background from the 5th to 3rd century BCE. Prior to the rise of the Qin Dynasty, China was divided into several independent states during the Warring States period. Among these, the state of Qin emerged as a powerful contender due to its efficient bureaucracy, military reforms, and strategic location in northwestern China. Qin Shi Huang, from 559 to 210 BCE, the first emperor of the Qin Dynasty, Yingzhang, was another way of pronouncing him, or Yingzhang, I think the Z is often pronounced as a J, ascended to the throne at the age of 13. He undertook a series of military campaigns, unifying China under his rule through conquest and diplomacy. So some of the previous leaders we've had focused more on diplomacy, some have focused more on military strategy. This was one of the leaders who managed to be successful at both. As for his centralization of power, one of Qin Shi Huang's most significant achievements was the centralization of power. He abolished the feudal system, replacing it with a highly centralized bureaucratic structure, standardizing laws, currency, weights, and measures across the empire. So standardization across many different metrics that even some of the most centralized states even today don't even have. Well, most states do have standardized currency, standardized laws, standardized weights, but what I mean is some, I guess, maybe continents. But nonetheless, he was one of the early ones to implement this across a broad region of ancient China. Furthermore, one of his most significant achievements, or the significant achievements, maybe of all time, was the construction of the Great Wall, or beginning of it. Qin Shi Huang initiated the construction of the Great Wall of China to defend against northern invasions. While the wall existed in earlier forms, he connected and reinforced the existing walls, creating an extensive defensive barrier. He's also, at his grave, there's the famous terracotta warriors, as we'll discuss soon, in the grave of Qin Shi Huang, featuring 8,000 soldiers, 130 chariots, 520 horses, 150 cavalry horses as well. So these large-scale constructions are almost getting close to paralleling those of the ancient Egyptians. Or the closest, we could say, at least the Great Wall would be maybe the closest parallel we've seen to the Great Pyramids of Giza. As for the Qin Dynasty at its zenith, from 221 to 210 BCE, starting with territorial expansion, under Qin Shi Huang's reign, the dynasty expanded into its territory significantly, incorporating regions that had previously been independent states. As for standardization and legalism, the emperor promoted legalism, a school of thought that emphasized strict adherence to laws and order. Standardization of writing, language, and measures were introduced to foster this unity. So sort of did the laws bring language, did the language bring laws? They sort of reinforced each other. Moving to the downfall, however, of the Qin dynasty, the tyrannical rule. Qin Shi Huang's rule was marked by a strict and often harsh administration. His policies, such as forced labor and high taxes, led to discontent among the population. As for the death of Qin Shi Huang in 210 BCE, the emperor died under mysterious circumstances, possibly due to mercury pills he believed would grant him immortality. As for rebellion and civil unrest, the tyranny of the Qin dynasty led to widespread discontent, and rebellions erupted across the empire following his death. As for Chu Han contention from 206 to 202 BCE, the most significant rebellion was the Chu Han contention, a civil war between the insurgent forces of Liu Bang, the founder of the Han dynasty, which we will cover, and Xiang Yu, a rebel leader. Liu Bang emerged victorious, leading to the collapse of the Qin dynasty. As for the legacy, despite its relatively short existence, very short period of time, the Qin dynasty left a lasting impact on China. It set the precedent for centralized imperial rule and established many administrative, cultural, and infrastructural foundations that later dynasties built upon. The name China itself is derived from the word Qin, which perhaps is pronounced Qin, pardon me for my pronunciation, highlighting the dynasty's historical significance. Thus, that is the brief history of the rise and fall of the Qin dynasty. We will now seek to detail more into the life of Qin Shi Huang, who was the earliest emperor of the dynasty, as well as likely the most important as he reached its zenith. So Qin Shi Huang, which So the most important ruler, perhaps, of the Qin Dynasty was Qin Shi Huang, also known as Yin Zhang. He was the first emperor of China and played a key of the imperial China and played a pivotal role in unifying the various warring states into a centralized empire. Therefore, we will seek to find a detailed biography of his life. So starting with his early life and rise to power, starting with his birth and childhood in 259 BCE, Yin Zhang was born in the state of Qin during the Warring States period. He was the son of King Xuanjiang and Qin and Lady Zhao, a concubine. So, powerful father, but not necessarily a powerful mother. But they also had sort of, perhaps the men tended to hold more power at this period. His birth name was Zhao Zhang. As for his ascension to the throne in 246 BCE, Yin Zhang became the king of Qin in the age of 13 after the death of his father. His reign began at a tumultuous time with the Warring Period states in full swing, or the Warring States period in full swing. As for his conquest and unification, starting with his military campaigns in the 230s to 221 BCE, under the guidance of his military chief minister, Li Si, and military commander, Wang Jian, Qin Shi Huang launched a series of military campaigns to conquer the other 6 major states. So it was one among 6 major states at the time he came into power, declaring himself Qin Shi Huang, which means first emperor of Qing. As for centralization of power and reforms, abolition of feudalism, Qin Shi Huang, meaning the first emperor of Qin, undertook a radical political transformation by abolishing the feudal system. He replaced it with a highly centralized bureaucratic government with power concentrated in the hands of the emperor. As for standardization of writing and measures, he ordered the standardization of writing scripts, weights, measures, and currency throughout the empire. This helped to create a sense of unity and facilitate communication across the vast territories. So something we're starting to observe across many of the most powerful empires is strong centralized authority, and one of the many causes of their decline is lack of centralization, which sort of allows for external threats to become more powerful. As for construction projects, Qin Shi Huang initiated ambitious construction projects, including the famous Terracotta Army, which is in his burial site, and the Great Wall of China, which there were portions at this before he came into power to fend off northerners. However, he was the one to make the large-scale connection and development of this great ancient wonder, and a network of roads and canals as well, as we shall highlight soon. These projects serve both practical and symbolic purposes. So something that even the earlier dynasties really focused on is, the earliest was to prevent from flooding, later to have irrigation for developing agriculture, and it seems to be just a common theme across the great leaders of ancient China. As for legalism and governance, adoption of legalism. Qin Shi Huang embraced the philosophy of legalism, which emphasized strict adherence to the laws and authority of the state. This ideology influenced his policies and governance style. One major standout state of legalism is often considered the Romans. It was a very legalistic state, and it was Alexis Tocqueville advocates for the perhaps rise of authoritarianism that might come of Germany, sort of foreshadowing Nazi Germany, was the legalist state. Having too long of a legal code allows for greater authoritarianism. So legalism sort of comes hand in hand with centralization. As for censorship and book burning, in an effort to suppress dissenting ideas and maintain ideological conformity, Qin Shi Huang ordered the burning of many books and burying of scholars who led different viewpoints. So censorship, very early in China's history, and to some extent exists today, but that's debatable as well, and I don't take a particular stance on that. But nonetheless, this was something that existed long ago. As for death and legacy, his death in 210 BCE. Qin Shi Huang died while on a tour of the eastern regions of his empire. The exact cause of his death remains a subject of historical debate. Some say that it was from the mercury tablets he was taking to try to live forever, but maybe he was tricked into doing so. As for his legacy and influence, as for his cultural contributions, as for his legacy and influence, pardon me, I think my page is backwards. As for his legacy, he's got his major victories, such as those of amalgamating all the states in terms of creating centralization across all the regions, in terms of weights, in terms of currency, and in terms of laws, and forming a legalist state. And therefore, one of the most important leaders of ancient China, and particularly the most important leader of the Qin Dynasty. So we'll now discuss the content of the slide before moving to the next emperor. I have notes here. But further other things, and despite the controversy surrounding his rule, Qin Shi Huang left an enduring legacy. He established the first centralized, unified Chinese empire and laid the foundation for subsequent dynasties. His administrative reforms, standardized efforts, and massive construction projects continue to influence Chinese history and culture. As for criticism and controversy, while Qin Shi Huang's achievements were monumental, his harsh and authoritarian rule also generated resentment and criticism that was perhaps unsustainable, particularly in later historical accounts. Qin Shi Huang's reign marked a pivotal period in Chinese history, setting the stage for the subsequent dynasties that would rule China for millennia to come. His impact on China's political, cultural, and architectural landscape remains profoundly significant to this day. So now to discuss the content of the slide. Pardon me, I had a little bit more to note. So titled Qin Shi Huang and the Qin Dynasty Empire, also known as the First Dynasty of Imperial China, or it was a former fief of a confederated Zhou dynasty. So it was just one amongst many feudal states. As for information, we have significant leader, Qin Shi Huang, Empire, Qin Dynasty, period 221 to 206 BCE, very short period. Modern location, China, million square kilometers, 2.3, million square kilometers, 0.89%, of the world, 1.71%. That's excluding Antarctica. That is one of the larger empires that we have covered. Not the largest. We have some that have been larger, such as that of Alexander, and such as that of the Babylonians, for example. Capital city, Xianyang. Government, absolute monarchy. Common languages, Old Chinese, which is even supposedly the modern Mandarin and Cantonese are offshoots from this original single language. Religion, ancestor worship, polytheism, and folk belief. Taoism and Confucianism as well. However, under his rule, he endeavored to standardize religion. That's better. Population between 20 and 30 million is the estimate. So very large, one of the largest empires to date, but considering the population of China today, over 1 billion, quite much smaller. So in the top right, we have top left, we have an image of Qin Shi Huang. To the right, we have the heirloom seal of the realm. To the right, we have an image of many of the terracotta soldiers in the tomb of Qin Shi Huang. Below that, we have an older image of the Great Wall. I don't necessarily know if this part was built during the Qin Dynasty, but it is generally, it is a beautiful part of the wall. But to the right, we have a map of where the wall was extended during the Qin Dynasty, so to the north. So the biggest threat was the north at the time. Below that, we have the Dujiangyan irrigation project, so something that's all the dynasties to date and up until this dynasty have been very focused on irrigation projects. To the right, we have some information. So first, the emperor, 221 to 210 BCE was Qin Shi Huang. And from 210 to 207 was Qin Shi. So only 2 emperors in this very significant dynasty, an emperor. And their respective chancellors was from under Qin Shi Huang from 221 to 208 BCE, Li Si, and 208 to 207 BCE, Zhao Gao. Historical era, so the ascension of Qin Shi Huang in 221 BCE, death of Qin Shi Huang in 210 BCE, and the surrender to Liu Bang, who began Han Dynasty in 206 BCE. From the top right, we have a map, as we can see, of a very large region, and we can see extending the Great Wall would have been around here, and keeping out the northern invaders. Less of a threat. They were less fearful of the West at this time, but a much larger area than we've seen in the previous emperors of ancient China. So we will now continue to the next emperor, and we'll talk a bit more about Qin Shi Huang in a comparison to come. So the Carthaginian Empire, which is, I said, hold a very special place in my heart. It was one of the earliest empires I started to learn about. Sort of a random suggestion from my father, but it was I was very happy to learn about it. I think a lot of people learn much about Rome, and they learn much about Rome's battles with Hannibal, the Punic Wars, for example, but they don't focus too much on the Carthage itself, or the Carthaginians itself. So thus, the Carthaginian Empire was a powerful ancient civilization based in the city-state of Carthage, located in present-day Tunisia. It was a significant maritime and trading power in the Mediterranean, rivaling Rome for dominance in the region. Therefore, we will seek to find a detailed history of the rise and fall of this important empire. Starting with the rise of Carthage, its foundation in circa 814 BCE. Carthage was founded by Phoenician settlers from the city of Tyre in the eastern Mediterranean. It grew to become a prosperous city-state with a focus on trade and commerce. As for expansion and dominance in the Western Mediterranean from the 6th to the 4th century BCE, Carthage established a network of colonies and trading posts across the Western Mediterranean, including in modern-day Tunisia, Libya, Spain, Sicily, and Sardinia. The city became a powerful maritime and economic force in the region. As for the Punic Wars, the First Punic War in 264 BCE to 241 BCE, the First Punic War was fought between Carthage and Rome over control of Sicily. After a long and grueling conflict, Rome emerged victorious. The war ended with a treaty of Lutatius, in which Carthage ceded Sicily to Rome. As for the interwar period from 241 to 218 BCE, Carthage faced internal political economic challenges, but it also expanded its holdings in Spain under the leadership of Hannibal Barca, the father of Hannibal. As for the Second Punic War in 218 to 201 BCE, the Second Punic War was sparked by Hannibal Barca's audacious crossing of the Alps into Italy. Hannibal achieved significant victories against Rome, including the famous Battle of Cannae. However, Rome gradually gained the upper hand and eventually defeated Carthage. The war ended with the Treaty of Zama, which imposed harsh terms on Carthage. So they were probably maybe some of the most important battles against Rome were the Roman Republic at the time. Rome was not an empire at this point, were fought against in these Punic Wars against Hannibal. In fact, even the process where Romans could elect a dictator for a period, which later led to very poor consequences ultimately by allowing the military leader to be dictator, was enacted because of the Carthaginian threat. They needed to have the leader needed to have absolute authority to control and to consolidate the people of Rome to fight against the Carthaginians. Had they lost either war, Rome would have been perhaps even conquered. As for the decline and the Third Punic War, the interwar period from 201 to 149 BCE, Carthage struggled to recover from the losses of the Second Punic War. It focused on rebuilding its economy and expanding its holdings in Africa. As for the Third Punic War from 149 to 146 BCE, Rome, fearing a resurgence of Carthage, launched the Third Punic War. After a lengthy siege, Carthage fell to Roman forces. So the city was systematically destroyed, and its inhabitants were either killed, sold into slavery, or dispersed. So very, very important military history against the Romans, but even during this time they were expanding all across the Mediterranean. As for some major victories, As for the legacy and influence of the Carthaginian Empire, its cultural contributions, Carthage made significant contributions to art, architecture, and trade. It was known for its impressive harbors, skilled shipbuilding, and distinctive art style influenced by the Phoenician culture. As for its conflict with Rome, the Punic Wars with Rome shaped the course of Mediterranean history. Carthage's rivalry with Rome was one of the defining geopolitical conflicts of the ancient world. As For cultural memory, the destruction of Carthage in the Third Punic War left a lasting mark on the Roman cultural memory, with the phrase "Carthago delendo est," Carthage must be destroyed, becoming a rallying cry for Roman politicians. As for continued influence, the legacy of Carthage endured in various forms, including the cultural, linguistic, and architectural influence it had on subsequent civilizations in the Mediterranean, having ruled over large swaths of the area. While Carthage ultimately fell, its impact on ancient Mediterranean history and its significance in the struggle for dominance in Western Mediterranean cannot be overstated. So as we can see, they covered all the way up to the Alps here, against the Romans, and all the way through Spain and Portugal and Italy as well, into Tunisia, into Libya, Algeria, Morocco, and all the way into close to Egypt as well, some of the islands as well, and Italy up here. So a massive area of land, and even that they conquered part of Italy, they could almost have gotten to Rome by this route as well. So we'll now discuss Hannibal in detail, one of the most important leaders. Plutarch's Parallel Lives covers many of the leaders who fought against the Carthaginians, but never does he cover Hannibal himself. So maybe this is one of the at least for many of you, as it is for me, one of the first dedicated biographies to Hannibal himself. Of course, there are many books on it as well, but many tend to group him in, or many tend to talk about him as the adversary, or the majority. The most important ruler of Carthage was Hannibal Barca, a brilliant military strategist and one of the greatest commanders in ancient history. Therefore, we will seek to find a detailed biography of his life. Starting with his early life and education, with his birth and the family background. In 247 BCE, Hannibal Barca was born in the city of Carthage, which was the capital of the Carthaginian Empire. He came from a prominent Carthaginian family, the Barcids, which was known for its military prowess. As for the influence of his father, 247 to 231 BCE, Hannibal's father, Hamilcar Barca, was a Carthaginian general who fought in the First Punic War. Hannibal grew up in a military environment, witnessing his father's campaigns and gaining valuable exposure to military strategy and tactics. As for his early career, his oath of enmity against Rome, circa 221 BCE. According to ancient sources, Hannibal took an oath of enmity against Rome at a young age, following the conclusion of the First Punic War. This oath would guide his life and career. So he took an oath that actually meant he had to fight against the Romans. So unlike, as we mentioned, some of the previous leaders who focused both on warfare and diplomacy, in the case of Carthage and Rome, they both were decided enemies. As for commander in Spain, from 221 to 219 BCE, after the First Punic War, Carthage focused on consolidating its power in Spain. Hannibal was appointed commander in the Carthaginian forces in Spain, where he continued his military education and honed his skills, so preparing up in Spain, almost getting close to Rome itself. As for getting close, as I said, not close necessarily. As for the Second Punic War, the lead up to the war in 218 BCE, Hannibal's invasion of Italy in 218 BCE marked the beginning of the Second Punic War. He famously led his army, which included war elephants, across the Alps to surprise the Roman Republic. So absolutely terrifying for many Romans who had never seen an elephant before. An elephant is, as today, the largest land animal in the world, and likely was the same at that time, or at least the largest that many Romans had seen. In fact, there's a little side discussion in Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire that they say like giraffes were a very rare thing. Many had never seen a giraffe in their life. It wasn't like modern day where one can go down to many zoos have giraffes. Giraffes were sort of seen very difficult to get, and elephants would even be more so, I would imagine. And so as for some of his major victories, Hannibal's achieved stunning victories against Romans in Italy, including the battles of Trebia, Trasimene, and the iconic Battle of Cannae in 216 BCE, where he executed a masterful double envelopment maneuver. As for strategic brilliance, Hannibal's innovative tactics and ability to adapt to changing battlefield conditions earned him a reputation as one of the greatest military commanders in history. So it must be noted that his soldiers were not on native soil. They were sort of adapting as they went, bringing these elephants like over the Alps. It was a very ambitious move, but nonetheless he was very adaptive and very, very ambitious. As for his defeat and later life, Rome's counteroffensive circa 215 to 203 BCE. Despite his successes, Hannibal faced challenges in sustaining his campaign in Italy. Rome launched counteroffensives and began to regain the upper hand. As for his return to Carthage in 203 BCE, Hannibal was recalled to Carthage to defend the city against Roman invasion. He continued to fight against Roman forces in North Africa, so Rome sort of had a counteroffensive and he had to return. As for the defeat at Zama in 202 BCE, Hannibal was defeated by Roman general Scipio Africanus at the Battle of Zama in 202 BCE. Scipio Africanus is one of the most biographed leaders of ancient Rome, or generals, effectively ending Carthage's chances of victory in the war. As for his later exile and death, as for exile and political intrigue from 202 to 183 BCE, after the war, Hannibal went into exile in various eastern Mediterranean kingdoms, including the Seleucid Empire, which we have previously covered and I hope you have or will endeavor to check out, and he became involved in regional politics and conflicts. As for his death in circa 181 BCE, Hannibal died in exile, possibly by poison, to avoid capture by the Romans who continued to pursue him. So that's how valuable he was, and that's how feared he was. As for his legacy, his military legacy, Hannibal's tactical innovations and strategies continue to influence military thought for centuries. He is studied in military academies around the world. As for historical significance, Hannibal remains an iconic figure in ancient history, known for his audacious campaign in Italy and enduring enmity with Rome. As for Hannibal Barca's legacy endures as one of the most formidable military leaders in ancient history, and his campaigns continue to be studied and admired for their strategic brilliance. So, very, very important leader, and sort of maybe the shining star of the Carthaginian Empire. So, we will now discuss the content of the slide. So, the title we have here, Hannibal Barca and the Carthaginian Empire, which is an ancient city that gave rise to a Semitic empire and one of the largest metropolises in the world at its time. Significant leader, Hannibal Barca. Empire, Carthage. Period 814 to 146 BCE. Modern locations, Tunisia, Libya, Algeria, Morocco, Spain, Portugal, and Italy. Million square kilometers, 0.3. Million square miles, 0.12. Percent of the world, 0.22%. So a little bit smaller, but nonetheless some very contested regions. They were battling against the Romans in Italy, even, for example. And that's excluding Antarctica as well. Capital, Carthage, the leading city of the city-state. Government, monarchy until 480 BCE, and republic led by Sophites thereafter. Common languages, Punic, Phoenician, Berber, Numidian, Iberian, and Ancient Greek. Religion, Punic religion, and population 3.7 to 4.3 million, so quite accurate guess estimates as to their population, but it varied over time. In the top left, we have an image of the great Hannibal Barca. To the right, we have the military standard of Carthage. To the right of that, we have the sign of Tanit, which was a cultic state insignia. To the right, we have a famous image of Hannibal crossing the Alps. As we can see, there's elephants, even supposedly elephants falling off cliffs, but nothing shows just this. Obviously, it doesn't looks like an absolute mess, but it's a sign of what great ambition he must have had. Below that, we have an image of the Battle of Himera, an image painted by Sciatti. Below that, we have some Carthaginian ruins, as we can see the masterful construction that they had in a beautiful place. Unfortunately, I've never been to Tunisia. I'd like to go. I've been to Morocco, I've been to Spain, but not Tunisia. So I'd like to go see some Carthaginian ruins someday. To the right, we have the suicide of Queen Dido, who was affiliated with Carthage and featured in Virgil, and this statue is by Coyote. So a tragic scene. To the right, we have a a breastplate, a Carthaginian breastplate, very tough looking, but also kind of gives us an image of what their bodies might have been shaped like at the time. Above that we have a perfume burner, so at least valued beauty and valued the sense. And below that and to the right we have famous Hannibal receiving the oath from Hannibal Barca, his father, the oath against Rome. So this sort of his task was sort of almost thrust upon him by the state and by his father, that he had to fight against Rome. If he didn't take this oath, maybe he would not have battled or gone to such lengths to defeat Rome, taking elephants over the Alps. Maybe it was all just because the wishes of his father. Above that we have some information, historical era, antiquity, founded by Phoenician settlers in circa 814 BCE. Independence from Tyre in the middle of the 6th century BCE, destroyed by Roman Republic in the Third Punic War in 146 BCE. Above that we have the map. See how they all covered almost the whole western Mediterranean, excluding, since we have Rome, I believe, is around there. I might be wrong, maybe it's up higher. But nonetheless, it captured part of Italy, many islands, and what's it called? We have Spain, we have Portugal as well, we have Tunisia, Morocco. You can see it expanding all the way over, and Libya, Algeria. So very large swath of land, and maybe they were too fixated on fighting the Romans, but maybe if they didn't, maybe the Romans would have attacked them earlier, as they did have quite expansionist policies. And it was sort of to rise in the Roman ranks, as we see in Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. Well, actually part of probably more Plutarch's Parallel Lives, because we're referring to the Republic of Rome. But to climb in the Roman Republic, one had to achieve many military victories, so they sort of had what's called in modern times the military-industrial complex almost. So that is the Carthaginian Empire and Hannibal, very fascinating leader and fascinating empire, which is often discussed only through their relation to Rome and often receives less focus directly. So we will now discuss the comparison between Qin Shi Huang of the Qin Dynasty and Hannibal Barca of the Carthaginian Empire. Qin Shi Huang of the Qin Dynasty and Hannibal Barca of the Carthage Empire were two of the most significant lead figures in ancient history, known for their respective roles in shaping the empires and leaving enduring legacies, and therefore we'll seek to find a comparison between the two. And in fact, they even lived in similar periods. As for their background and origins, with Qin Shi Huang was born Yingzhang, was his original name, and was ruler of the Qin Dynasty in ancient China. He came from the state of Qin, which was known for its formidable military and political strength in the Warring States period, and came to be the successful leader in the Warring States period. His rise to power was influenced by the political turmoil and rivalries among Chinese states. As for Hannibal Barca, so Qin Shi Huang came in a difficult time, period of warring states. It wasn't clear that the Qin dynasty would come out on top. As for Hannibal Barca, he was a Carthaginian general born in the city-state of Carthage, a powerful maritime empire in the Mediterranean. His father was a leader as well. He hailed from the Barcid family, known for its military prowess, and grew up amidst the aftermath of the First Punic War, so also grew up in a time of much turmoil, and after a defeat, in fact. As for military achievements, starting with Qin Shi Huang, while Qin Shi Huang personally led armies in battle early in his career, his reign is more renowned for its consolidation of power and establishment of a centralized bureaucratic system. His conquest focused on unifying various Chinese states to create the first Chinese empire, but clearly, as we see with the terracotta soldiers, he definitely had many soldiers and was prepared for battle. As for Hannibal Barca, Hannibal is celebrated primarily for his military genius and audacious campaigns against Rome during the Second Punic War. He achieved stunning victories in Italy, notably the Battle of Cannae, which using innovative tactics and strategies. So perhaps maybe Qin Shi Huang was the better general in that he sort of never lost, I guess, but his descendant quickly was defeated anyways, so maybe it wasn't sustainable, but nonetheless Hannibal Barca is sort of known almost solely for his military successes and less for his political reforms, whereas Qin Shi Huang was definitively significant in the centralization of government in ancient China, the centralization of, or the making a legal state, the focus on one specific language and one currency as well, and weighting systems as well. As for leadership style and achievements, Qin Shi Huang was known for his autocratic and centralized rule. Qin Shi Huang abolished feudalism, standardized writing systems, and implemented administrative reforms. He undertook massive construction projects, including the Great Wall of China, and promoted legalism as a state of philosophy. So in terms of architectural achievements, maybe a +1 to Qin Shi Huang, but maybe Hannibal Barca's architectural achievements were just destroyed by the Romans, but nonetheless, I don't think they would have been quite as significant as the Great Wall of China. As for Hannibal Barca, but it must be noted that the Great Wall of China was not completely completed within the Qin Dynasty, but it was completed to such an extent that it was inspired its continuation. As for Hannibal Barca, was a brilliant tactician, known for his adaptability on the battlefield, often employing unconventional strategies. His leadership was characterized by audacity, bringing elephants over the Alps, innovative tactics, and deep understanding of terrain and logistics. So he was battling in foreign ground. As for legacy, Qin Shi Huang is remembered as the first emperor of China. So he's also the founder of dynasty, and in fact, the founder of the first imperial dynasty of China, who unified the country and left a centralized bureaucratic system that influenced subsequent dynasties. His harsh rule and burning of books also left a controversial legacy, and censorship as well, the burning of the books. As for Hannibal Barca's legacy is primarily in terms of military, and he is celebrated for his strategic brilliance and his ability to achieve remarkable successes against formidable opponent like Rome, perhaps the most formidable at its time. He remains a legendary figure in military history and is studied in military academies worldwide. As for the end of their empires, Qin Shi Huang's dynasty eventually fell due to a combination of internal rebellions and external pressures from neighboring states, leading to the rise of the Han dynasty, but it was his descendant that ultimately was defeated. As for Hannibal Barca, Carthage, after its defeat in the Second Punic War, faced further conflicts with Rome, leading to the destruction of the city-state, the Third Punic War, while Qin Shi, and thus his, so they both were close to the absolute destruction of their states, but nonetheless, sort of Hannibal was an exile for a long time, being hunted down, supposedly poisoned, but Qin Shi Huang, well, he was maybe poisoned as well because he died of mercury. So maybe that's a similarity, both maybe were assassinated. While Qin Shi Huang and Hannibal Barca lived in different parts of ancient world and ruled over vastly different empires, interestingly enough, though, during similar periods, they both left indelible marks on history through their leadership, military prowess, and enduring legacies in the annals of ancient civilization. So I hope you found these two empires as fascinating as me. I think they're sort of key empires that sort of maybe people don't focus on as much, but I think they should, and I think there's a lot more areas that we can explore too. So once again, this is Qin Shi Huang of the Qin Dynasty and Hannibal Barca, or Barca, of the Carthaginian Empire. My name is Kalen Ashcroft. This is Cashcroft TV. Thank you very much for your support, and I hope you continue to do so. Thank you very much.